What's up, people? You know that sound is the Unfiltered Band. It means another episode of Unfiltered coming at you right here and now, episode 56, honoring 9/21/01 and my relationship with sports. Lots to cover in this episode. Appreciate the Unfiltered Band for being with us. You can get on the Unfiltered Revolution at Casey Stern on Twitter. If you're already on Twitter, get into the bio and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like the videos, jump on board. Give me your ideas as you have them and all sorts of stuff as we go along. As you know, I do a lot of live pods and try and talk about things other than sports. And, a lot of times sports and life connect in ways in which we had never prepared. And I wanted to get into that a little bit here. Every time I look at the calendar, I'm reminded of where I was the same way you're all reminded of where you were back on September 11th of 2001. I've mentioned this in a previous podcast, but 9/21/01 is the greatest sporting event I've ever been to, which is unfair to say for two reasons. One, even though Piazza hit a home run and they won a game, using the word great on it feels wrong. Two, it's not comparative to any or comparable to any other sporting event I've ever been to. Being in the building that night was unlike something or anything I'll ever experience again because nothing could ever be that way. And luckily, you hope, God willing, nothing will ever have to feel that way. There aren't many highlights that just by watching a highlight can make your hair stand up, give you chills, and take you to a place that's deeper, more emotional, and more of a core than a highlight in sports should do. Doesn't matter how much you love the team. Doesn't matter if it's the last of a good season, a winning season, a championship moment, a defining moment where they lost, the last time you were in a stadium, a time you were in a park, a time you were in the arena. It doesn't matter. There aren't many things that take you there. There aren't many moments that take you there, to that place, to that core, to that feeling. Every time I watch the Mike Piazza highlight, still, I'm in that place immediately. The amazing thing is how much we're in that place, whether you're a Met fan, a New Yorker, even American. It's the most that I've ever felt tied to other humans that I didn't know in my whole life, in a building of any kind, let alone one in sports. It includes being in churches, even though I'm Jewish, plenty of times, or in synagogues. There was a different feeling that night. Living in New York and growing up on Long Island and working in the city and working just a few blocks from the Trade Center at the time, everybody knew stories of people who had passed. Everybody knew stories of people who lost loved ones. Everybody was feeling in their own way scared. Not the scared that you're going to lose a division lead. Not the scared that somehow your team didn't make the move you want at a trade deadline or in an off season, but scared. All of us. Not old, young, not races, not religions, humans. The night before that game, my friends and I connected, two other friends, and we didn't have tickets, all working in separate jobs in the city at the time, all three of us. And we said we have to go tomorrow night somehow. And during the next morning, I sat on email. I was working at the S&P at the time, and we emailed back and forth, and somebody had gotten, and I don't remember. I think it might have been Craigslist. Somebody had, or something like that. But somebody had gotten wind of a guy in Manhattan who had 3 tickets in the upper deck. We ended up getting tickets, and literally by the afternoon, after lunchtime, had already set up picking up from this guy's office to go to the stadium. I remember everything about being in that building that night. Everything. I remember the goosebumps during the national anthem. I remember when Liza Minnelli sang. I remember the bagpipes. I remember how many times I found myself crying. Everyone crying. There was a sense of pride of being in that building where you felt like you had a chance to, like, as humans, be on some stage where we were representing the pride and the fact that we were not going to allow this to change our lives. And baseball became this thing, this way that we were going to, as fans, right, show that, it's even though, football's been probably for a long time, but it's, America's pastime, right? I mean, it's this is this is who we are. I remember talking to Chipper Jones at the town hall I did with him here in Decatur a few years ago, and hearing him, and I'd heard him tell the story before, but sit right next to me and tell me the story about that day and it being the only game of his entirety of his life as a competitor that he was, and an off the charts Hall of Fame player, but Hall of Fame competitor that he was. The only time that he ever was okay losing a game. I don't know what it would have felt like if the Mets lost that night. I don't know how the game would have been remembered. As baseball coming back, as all of the things I said about uniting, of all the things about facing fears and pride and all of that, I'm sure on the ride home, for a week, for a month, for when people said this is the date that baseball returned to New York. But when Mike Piazza took that swing, that changed how that game would be remembered forever. Because the joy that ensued in that moment and the raw emotion of letting go of all of the things that had been so locked up and tied up by so many people in so many different ways, it was out. I remember I had only been back to work about a couple of days before this. They had just opened up the subways in the area where I work down on Water Street. You couldn't get there. Offices were closed. And I remember being on the subway, passing under on the 1-9, that area to get to my stop. And it's the loudest silence I've ever heard. I remember how weird it was. There was something different about being a New Yorker during that time. There was something different about being in New York at that time. Going through all of that and then being able to go to a baseball stadium and had everybody kind of, step up and say, "Hey, here we are," right? It was just such it was an amazing feeling of unity in a world that we live in right now where there's so many. I mean, it's these things are good reminders, not just for, like, as sports fans, for us to have understanding of being grounded for where sports live in our lives. But I feel like in a time where right now everybody is so just all across the board with, you go on Twitter and what political party or who's doing this or who voted for who, and everybody's got their own. I mean, it is vaccinations and all kinds of stuff we dealt with right the last couple of years. Everybody's so concerned about where they stand and who they stand with. That night, everybody stood with each other. That night, everyone stood with each other. Different backgrounds, different beliefs, different support systems, different childhoods, different upbringings, races, religions, ages. It didn't matter. Teams that they rooted for, there were Braves fans in the stands. There were Braves on the field. But it was about something way bigger than that. And it's the only time I've ever been in a building that has ever given that to me. Because yeah, you get in there and look, I mean, sometimes, outside of like a few random fans for the road team, like if you root for a team that's real good or in a building, like look, yeah, I've been at Knicks playoff games. It just seems like there was like forever ago. And it's mostly Knicks fans in, and the Garden is a crazy place during that time period. And you feel like a crazy unity that way, right? Like you could be in the bathroom at a stall and you're having a conversation with three people you don't even know about what just happened before halftime. Like, yeah, there's that, but never like this. Nothing ever like this. Baseball brought us as humans back to the belief that reality could be reality again. That's an amazing gift that sports gives us. I've mentioned this in the past on previous pods. I got that gift several different times in several different ways in my life, as I'm sure many of you have. I mentioned what the two conference final runs of the Islanders, my favorite team in any sport, meant to me during a very, very difficult time in my life, especially the second one. And how I literally can tell you, looking back at it, there were times I didn't know that I would get through, that I feel like I got through because there was a game that night. Because there was some escape. There was something that was intense, but in a way that I could feel enjoyment and excitement towards something, possibilities and hope and all of that. And for all of us, I think at low points in our life, individually, sports will do that, but never anything like that. Never anything to that level. There will never be another game like that. There will never be another swing like that. There will never be, God willing, again, the need for the meaning of something like that again. And every time we come around to this time of year and we're involved in these baseball, postseason pushes and get excited about all these games, and now football starts tonight and all that stuff, as I tape this here on the 8th on a Thursday, it's just an unbelievable feeling to think about what it was like being there for that. Where were you when? The where were you when that had happened 10 days before that is one that will live for all of us in many, many different ways. And some in ways that they can't spend and discuss with certain family members they lost because of how that is remembered and discussed and lived through again. I don't think I realized walking into that building at Shea Stadium that night that I was now, as a fan, just like everybody else, I was there for another moment that would be like that. That other people would be saying, where were they when? That baseball fans, not just New Yorkers, not just even these sports fans, that just people. That resonated so far and above anything that was baseball related, or like what the standings were, or that it was Mets Braves or any of that, or even that it was Piazza. But the fact that it was Mets Braves and that it was Piazza and that it happened the way it happened, that's the way it was supposed to happen, because that was the moment that we were supposed to be given. Not we as Met fans, not even we as New Yorkers, but we as people, to feel some emotion and some joy. It's an amazing thing to look back on and realize that baseball, in so many ways, it's like, how can you not be romantic about baseball? And when we think about that, we think about, okay, like, how can you not be romantic about the strategy, or about the beauty of the baseball field, or all of watching black and white highlights and all the, the things that you do, the past and the traditions and all of that. But in a moment that was a time period that was so scary and so eerie that we needed such unity. Many people more than baseball fans go back and think of that as one of the first unifying moments that they remember about that entire time period in all of our lives. That's pretty powerful stuff. To be there in that building was something that I feel really blessed and lucky to have been, because after everything that happened, you feel blessed and lucky to have just been alive for it, right? But to see it and to see what it became, it's not something to ever forget for a multitude of reasons, as an experience of what everybody went through and what happened. But the experience of baseball and the role it played in moving forward, in combining and being unified for all of it, from it, together, it's one of the coolest, most emotional experiences I've ever had, let alone one that's in a sports building or a stadium, in this case, at Shea. 9/11 never will be forgotten, never should. And those of us who were blessed not to lose family members never should realize the blessing of that, nor should we ever stop giving support to people who we all know in our lives who did. But we'll never forget the role baseball played in it either. And 9/21/01, that's a whole different ballgame. Stay unfiltered.